All right, so for this module, we are just going to be focusing on Wida itself, just kind of what it is, its background, and how it applies to education in Missouri. So some key vocabulary. Wida stands for World Class Instructional Design Assessment. No shortage of modesty there. Um, ELP is your English language proficiency. Access is the big test that our Wida students um, or our students who are part of the Wida program, I should say, our ELL students, are going to take part in the test in January. Um, our domains, which you should be pretty familiar with at this point from your lesson plan project, are the four areas in which WIDA kind of focuses on. And then the strands work off of those domains. And we'll look a little bit closer at that here in the next couple slides. So just a brief bit of the history. The 12 requires you to have English language proficiency standards um, to help out ELL students and also to build an assessment measure of performance. This is kind of where WIDA started. WIDA stands for Open States. Not every state uses WIDA. Missouri is a state that does use WIDA, and there's access to that later on in the PowerPoint with a couple links. Basically, you have your state content standards and then your English language proficiency standards, WIDA, and then those two combined together towards the access. So there's a progression there for ELL students and to assess their knowledge. Just how it kind of pans out and is in terms of accountability. You have your standards, your EALPs, and that is works with academic achievement, and then you have your state standard, which kind of coincides with the major assessments that our students take. ELL students still take MAP tests, so they still take state level standard tests, but they will also take this test as well, the access test. All right, so the WIDA strands, the WIDA standards. We have 5, and I'll let you read through those. Basically, you have social and instructional. You have language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. Just a little bit about language versus content, which is something that I think is really important, especially for our lesson plans, because I know that it's kind of a hard thing to wrap your head around is your language targets and language proficiency versus your content knowledge. And basically, they really are two different things. One focuses on the content, the how, and then the language proficiency really it just focuses on the language associated with that content, and that's a big thing to think about and just to keep in mind is your language proficiency just focuses on that language itself. So the WIDA standards, just to kind of break it down, they're expressed in these model performance indicators, MPIs, and we'll see that here in the chart here in just a minute. And they are broken up over those domains. Okay, so each standard, then you have your language domains, and then they're kind of clustered by grade here. Okay, so I think this is a good one to hang on to, especially when you're making your language targets. I think this is a really good list to work off of. So you have your match vocabulary. So your language function, what are you looking for the student to do in terms of language use? Are you asking them to match? Then you move further up, recall, retell. So this first column here would be like your very naive students or just younger students. Then you have it works its way up. So with recall, retell, define, and then you move all the way up to your like explain, critique, elaborate. So this would be higher on the scale, more English proficient. Okay, so use this if you're having trouble with your language targets as a way of kind of just some keywords to help you kind of jumpstart what you're looking for. This is So we started with the language aspect, and now we're going to bring it into content. So this is just a great little chart, and I'm not going to go over each thing in it, but because there's a lot to unwrap. But basically, it's example topics and genres. So we have, that standard one all the way up to standard five. Looking at, you know, and you can kind of see the progression of it moving through, and also just becoming a bit more in depth. So this would be also a good tool if you're really struggling with those language targets to just kind of see how that moves. Yeah. All right. So what are the WIDA standards? Um, this element three is going to be your support or strategies. This is should look pretty familiar. This is that system of supports area in your lesson plan. Um, anytime you can implement um, interactive supports, graphic supports, sensory supports in a lesson, that's a great way to really just to provide an aid for especially ELL students. And I mean, really, it just helps bridge knowledge in general when students are getting information on two different paths. Whether it's auditory and visual, or if they're reading and also interacting with other students, sharing. It's just going to help out. So these supports strategy. All right. So the within each of your domains, you're going to have this scale, and this is really what WIDA looks like from a teacher standpoint, and what we see a lot of. So you have these five levels, and they progress. Entering all the way up to bridging, and outside of bridging, that's when they're exiting the ELL program. Your goal is to have them at level 5 for everything. Um, and you can kind of see the progression just in terms of, identify to interpret. Um, and as you can see with the arrow down below, the whole goal of this is you have your support strategies, and as you work towards bridging, you're starting to remove those support strategies so that they're working on their own. Um, and the goal is that they're increasing the language complexity during this process. All right, so assessment for WIDA. They have a big summative assessment. It's called the access test. The access test is taken in January, and it is basically it's and this is what Missouri uses. It's our way of determining their language levels, and it's broken up over those 4 domains, and they're tested in each one. Typically, the test is, well, it used to be person to person, but now it's very digital. One thing that students really struggle with is the speaking part of it, because they're speaking to a computer instead of another person. I personally have a little bit of issue with that. I think that that's an unfair way to test, but that's not up to me. For our resource, I encourage you to check this out just to kind of get familiar with it. It's the Missouri's WIDA page. It is, I think it's good to kind of take a look at it, even if you're not going into ELL education to be an ESL teacher. I think that it's good to just kind of get an idea of where Missouri is, and just how Missouri approaches this, because this may be something that you're involved in at some level when you were teaching. All right, so basically, I want you to look at your experience from your lesson plan that you made, and how do you feel that language proficiency sits with your lesson? Is it, are you kind of surprised by how much language has to do with your lesson? Do you feel like language doesn't play a large role in your lesson or your content area? So I just kind of want you to discuss that. I really want us to reflect on just language and the way we use language in our content area. And then also, I just want you to talk about and kind of discuss if you had any issues with separating your language objectives from your content objectives. If you felt like that was kind of a gray area, and we can start a discussion on that. All right, so as usual, our discussion post is due on Thursday with 2 responses on Sunday. Hope everyone has a great week.